Hi, I'm Dani. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're ready to thrift flip this suit with me. If you like content like this, please subscribe and hit the notifications so you know when new episodes come out. This upcycle was inspired by a Chanel suit that I found on Pinterest. I absolutely loved it. I'd never seen anything like it. I thought it was super unique, and I changed up the design a little bit to suit my own personal interests. So I have a skirt in the length that I liked, so I just used this to measure how much I was going to cut from the red suit. I gave myself 1 inch of seam allowance at the bottom, or just about, and then I went ahead and I closed up the back slit. This is just so then I was able to even out that line. So as you could see, that definitely changed how things looked. And I realized that in hindsight, so that's why I went back and redid this. And then all you have to do is cut right along that line. And this fabric is great for that because you can already see the natural grain of the tweed. So it was really, really easy to follow. The next thing I did was separate the lining from the outside of the skirt. This just made it a lot easier for me to hem up the bottom. And I just hemmed up about 1 inch. I'm going ahead and pinning these sections down. I remeasure in the back just to make sure that it's pretty accurate. The step I like to take to make sure that I can kind of envision how the final result is going to look is that I like to iron it down to get a really nice clean hem. And then I actually tried on the skirt to make sure that I liked it and it looked even. I was happy, so then now I'm just taking it to the sewing machine and sewing right along that edge, which was super easy to do. The next thing that I did was take up the lining, and I like to always sort of just tuck this in so that there's not a really rough edge or a raw edge on the inside of the suit, so where it would be laying against your skin. And then I just sewed this really quick. I'm not too particular about the lining because you don't really see it. That's the finished product, and then I went ahead and then I re-ironed the hem just to make sure everything was really nice and pressed. Now it's time to attach the tulle skirt. I ruffled the skirt on my own using a little hack that I show you in another episode, so if you want to know how that part was created, then just click on this other episode up in the corner. Essentially, I took, probably 3 yards of tulle and I ruffled it, and then I went ahead and sewed it, and I just made this continual. So I started at one end and then I continued to sew until I ran out of the fabric. When you do this, be careful not to let any of the extra tulle get caught underneath your sewing needle, like in places you wouldn't want it to be sewn, which I did a few times, and I had to cut and then start again. Next, I decided to attach pockets that were from the blazer to the skirt in order to recreate that Chanel look. So I laid them out about where I wanted them to be placed. I tried on this piece to make sure that's how I wanted it to look. And then I went back to be a little bit more precise and used a measuring tape to make sure that the measurements were accurate. I didn't want to sew through this, so I ended up just using some E6000 and I just glued this right in place. This is something you can do if you don't have a sewing machine. Of course, you're going to need about a day to let it just sit and dry. The next thing I did was add a velvet trim to line these pockets. This is just something that I wanted to do. I saw the velvet trim at the fabric store and I was like, yes, that's fabulous. I love it. I want to use it to bring out the black threads in this suit. So I just glued that right on there. Then I made mini velvet bows and then sewed those down and then threw on some buttons on top. Now it was time to cut the skirt. So what I did was I laid it out as flat as possible. I tied a string around it, as you can see. I pulled this string down to the length where I thought I would want it to be. I think that you should always go longer than you think it should be because you can always start to cut shorter. So I was pretty conservative when I first started this until I found the right length when I put it on and where I liked it to sit on my legs. So then I just took my little rolling scissor thing, rolled it across. I ended up putting the ruler on it to keep it straight, and then I used a rock to hold down the ruler. And then I just went ahead and got the little excess pieces and trimmed those by hand. That ended up working out really well. I've never tried that before, but it worked. Now it was time to crop the blazer. So I'm just literally using a line of chalk and I'm gonna cut right along that. I tried on the blazer and I made sure that this is about where I wanted it to hit. I knew I wanted to chop it right above that button, and then that would still give me about 1 inch seam allowance to hem the blazer. This is super easy to do, and now I have this cool extra piece of fabric and I still don't know what I'm gonna do with it, but I know I'll use it one day. The next thing that I did was start hemming the blazer. And the way that I do this in order to have a really nice clean look is first I started pinning, of course. I pinned all the way around it to make sure that this is how I wanted it to look. I tried on the blazer and then I was happy, I ironed it down, and then of course after I ironed it to see how it would look in the end, and then I went ahead and then just sewed that hem. By the way, if you love my channel and you want to support it, please just screenshot this episode, post it to an Instagram story, then tag and hashtag me at Dani Walker, especially if you try this upcycle for yourself. I'd love to see it. Next was taking up the lining. So same as before, I'm just going to tuck that underneath. I'm going to iron this down. Now I decided to use heat and bond. I used the light version of it because it's a little bit more flexible. All you have to do is cut a small strip for this. Then I attached it shiny side down to the outside of the coat and I started ironing this down. After it was all ironed down to the outside of the coat, then you just go ahead and you're going to lift up the paper from the adhesive. So now you can see the shiny adhesive right there. It looks perfect. Now I'm just going to go ahead and iron down my already ironed lining. And as you can see, I'm not pulling the lining really tight across the blazer. I'm letting it have a little bit of space. If you pull it tight or all the way down to the edge of the outer part of the blazer, you could start to get some pulling on your blazer, and you really don't want that. Now, this is just something that I do because I just prefer the look of it. So I hand sew the last little part. This part is a little bit tricky to get it to stay or sit how I want it to with a sewing machine. So I decided to do this part by hand. And then I just tacked down the edge of that lining just as a precaution, just so it wouldn't move around. It's a step you can skip though. And then one of the last things is replacing the buttons. I usually upgrade buttons on all of my upcycles. I just think that it adds this like really beautiful finishing touch. Give me a thumbs up if you love to do that too. After I replaced the buttons, I decided to also add that same velvet trim that was on the pockets to the coat as well. I thought it would be really, really cute and tie everything together. As I was placing this, I also just clamped down on that just so then it could really, really set into the fabric. And I didn't leave these clips on for too long just because they can leave an indent in the velvet. So I'd say I probably left them on for an hour before I felt confident in the glue. I also took an extra step once again to stitch down some of the edges of that velvet trim just so there wasn't any fraying. This is the final look and product. I was so pleasantly surprised with this. It was something that took quite a bit of thought to figure out, but I ended up loving it. And I just thought it was such a fun take on this upcycled, kind of a classic look. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you try something like this for yourself to make things in your closet look brand new. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you're subscribed.